Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of the divinity, the most lovingly gracious, the most affectionately merciful, the one who envelops us in gentle mercy like the womb, Rahim, to which the divinity declares in a Hadith Qudsi, to which he gave her very own name. God, the grandmother then, a little more than God, the grandfather or the father, more yin than yang. The loving mercy that is above all the quality of divinity, the quality that makes her Rabbul Alameen, Lord of the multitude of worlds, all subsisting in the womb of her loving mercy, the universal Lord of the pluriverse, allowing all to be, gently sustaining their finite existence. Adab, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome and Khosh Amdeed to all of you here, especially to our honorable speakers who so kindly and enthusiastically, in fact, responded to our somewhat late invitation and have come from so far to be with us today, as Najib was saying, and tomorrow, inshallah. Welcome all to Habib University's 6th Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference on the Ethical and the Spiritual in Islam, Past, Presents, Futures. The theme of the conference, as many of you will no doubt have noted, is centrally illustrated in our conference ephemera by the beautiful and demanding hadith, Takhallaku bi akhlaq Allah, a miracle of condensed sapience and wisdom, barely 5 sublime words. I'm willing to argue with somebody afterwards about how to count 5 in Takhalluku bi akhlaq Allah, but one of our speakers, Professor Alexander Key, also helps me with it, and he's a hardcore Arab grammarian type, so I feel I'm on solid ground here. A miracle of condensed sapience and wisdom as much as of commanding breviloquence. Yeah. Brevity, eloquence, breviloquence. Khalaqa, as no doubt all of you know, is to create, to originate, to shape and to form. The brilliance and divine force of the hadith comes from the echo of khalaqa immediately after in akhlaq, that is, in what we moderns usually translate as ethics, but is better said as ethos, as Najib was also indicating. It becomes immediately clear to the listener that ethics is a creative and originative enterprise. This is what the Prophet is saying, that ethics is a creative and originative enterprise, and an enterprise of which the telos, the goal, is divinity, the divinity. In this, it greatly resembles, and there can be no talk of influence here, which is in any case not a terribly interesting or valuable category of analysis. We would think more if we didn't think about influence, I think. It greatly resembles the famed telos of the Platonic silsila. Homoiosis thei katato dinaton. Remarkably also 5 words. I'm sure that's not lost on many people. Becoming like God so far as is possible. This is the Platonic silsila, this is their motto. But the hadith is more explicative and more compelling, as I have shown, of the creative and originative character of the endeavor of theosis, becoming godlike, and also more sharply focused on or explicit about the ethical nature of the enterprise. En passant and vice versa, it also implicitly serves to remind us that creation itself is an ethical act. Kamal ki baat. Creation itself is it's implicit. Speaking in our modern terms, there is virtually no space here between the ethical and the spiritual. The two are consubstantial. Takhallaku bi akhlaq Allah. Cultivate the ethos of the divinity. A translation hardly worthy of the genius and sublime imperativity of the original, its breviloquence existing just this side of the silence of the one, whose speech exists at the limit of the limitless, the rarest of all. The absolute centrality of ethical charter to the prophetic mission is also famously given in the hadith, Innama boistu li uttamimam akarimal akhlaq. I was dispatched in order, baisat ki baat ho rahi hai. I was dispatched in order to complete or make whole, to perfect or to make precise the magnanimity or nobility of ethos. That is, the Prophet's charter is to disseminate a certain rigorous expansiveness in the originative enterprise of ethics. Yeah? To disseminate a certain rigorous expansiveness, that's what karam is. Yeah? A rigorous expansiveness in the originative enterprise of ethics. For he himself, as the Quran affirms, is of an immense ethos. Yeah? وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلَقٍ عَظِيمٍ. In terms of the subsequent elaboration of this theophilosophy, for are not ethos and praxis at the heart of wisdom? One of my personal favorite articulations of the intimate relation between ethics and spirituality from the Muslim tradition is from Ibn Miskawayh's 10th century book of spiritual ethics, Tehzeeb al-Akhlaq, which is, of course, a locus classicus of the elaboration of Islamic ethics. In the fifth discourse on love and friendship, in the section titled Virtue is Realized Only in Association, Virtue is Realized Only in Association, by the translator Konstantin Zurek, Miskawayh argues for the strenuousness of virtue. Yeah? Virtue is laborious. For the strenuousness of virtue by saying, quote, the nature of human happiness is such that it cannot be achieved without bodily actions, civic conditions, good assistants, and sincere friends. Yeah? These necessities are, as you see, many in number and require hard toil. It is for this reason, this is still Miskawayh, it is for this reason that we have censored those who lead an ascetic life. We have censored those, that is, he does not approve, he's talking about himself, we meaning Ibn Miskawayh, that we have censored those who lead an ascetic life when they seek solitude away from other men, live in mountains and caves, and choose the state of savagery, which is the opposite of civilization, for they become deprived, this is his point, they become deprived of all the moral virtues which we have enumerated. How is it possible for a person to be temperate, just, generous, or courageous if he forsakes other men, keeps away from them, and women, of course, keeps away from them and loses moral virtues? Would he not be then in the rank of the inanimate or the dead? Close quote. Another example of this intimate relation between the ethical and the spiritual is the fact that the word for the spiritual quest, suluk, is also the same as how one treats others. That is, ethics or ethos. One's spiritual stature is identical to one's ethical stature. Something very strange is happening in our times, all over the world, that the ethical and the spiritual are becoming two separate things. How is that possible? What sense does that make? Another example of this, that is ethics or ethos. One's spiritual stature is identical to one's ethical stature. For a fine thing it would be to imagine one had reached the possible limits of theosis, becoming godlike, only to lose one's composure for the first encounter with another human being. Since this conference, beginning today, marks a decade of the convention of Habib University's flagship Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference, allow me to say something briefly about the trajectory of the PHEC, Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference. Our conference was first convened in 2013. It seems like virtually a different planet, just in the space of a decade. It's amazing the rapidity of this catastrophe that Najib was talking about. Our conference was first convened in 2013, the year before the beginning of formal operations in the fall of 2014, and significantly, soon after we had drawn up the blueprint for Habib's singular liberal core curriculum. Our core curriculum, which Najib was also talking about, didn't explicitly announce its post-colonial logic in so many words at the time, but it was nevertheless evident in Nuche, even in its then schematic form, proceeding, that is, from a critical post-colonial analysis of global and regional modernity to a reclamation of Islam's deeply sapiential philosophical temperament and sensibility, as a first reparative gesture in the post-colonial ruins. This is the abstract with which we began. It's a decade. This is the 10th anniversary. So allow me to share with you how we started out. First annual Habib University Conference on Post-Colonial Higher Education. It didn't end up being exactly annual. This is the 6th. So we missed a few, but it's not biannual, at least it's a little more. So we get 6 out of 10, which is not a very good grade at Habib. But first annual Habib University Conference on Post-Colonial Higher Education, the developmentalist imperative that emerged as the charter of anti-colonial nationalism variably limited the vision of post-colonial education that was instituted by national states in the wake of formal decolonization. In particular, what in German are called the Geisteswissenschaften, the sciences of the spirit or mind, the knowledges of the humanities and social sciences, were given an even lower priority than is their general fate in technocratic advanced capitalist societies. This is because these knowledges, the knowledges of the human sciences, bear an intrinsic relation to local contexts, cultures, histories, and languages, which in post-colonial societies were intrinsically thought to be anachronistic and an impediment to modernization and national advancement in the global stage of development. This had an impact on the hard sciences themselves, since the latter intrinsically depend on the so-called soft sciences for the considered determination of their goals and character. In South Asia, the marginalization of the human sciences is particularly marked in Pakistan, for instance, where the model of development adopted under the forthrightly neo-colonial tutelage, Pakistan was really the neo-colony of neo-colonies, Neo-colonial tutelage of the United States was even more narrowly focused on the paradigm of economic development. The results are glaringly obvious. Even as national and world historical crises gather apace, we are increasingly lacking in the specific moral and intellectual resources that would enable us to forcefully engage with them. Developments within the domain of religion, which is being rapidly evacuated of its critical ethical, and so this is written in 2013, right? Remember? Which is being rapidly evacuated of its critical ethical and intellectual content, are only the most obvious example of this process of moral and intellectual erosion and privation. This example also shows that the regnant paradigm of education in the West, where itself the human sciences, the humanities and social sciences, are under unprecedented attack from the forces of technocratic neoliberalism, may itself be lacking in the specific cognitive and intellectual resources required at the present conjuncture. The Habib University Conference on Post-Colonial Higher Education will invite global scholars, thinkers, activists, and writers to reflect on the crisis, direction, and goals of higher education at the present conjuncture. Over the decades since that statement, the PHEC has become an intellectual event known for its thought-provoking, paradigm-setting themes. More importantly, in this brief period of time, Habib University has established itself as one of Pakistan's top undergraduate institutions, and certainly singular in its curricular and intellectual paradigm. As a cohort, our graduates are unmatched in their understanding of the modern post-colonial world they have inherited, its essential structures and historical trajectories. Whether they are scientists and engineers or artists, scholars, and many other professions, Habibis are unrivaled too in their perception and understanding of what is broken and damaged in our world. What is broken and damaged in our world, and of the thoughtfulness and resources, the orientation and vision needed to heal and repair it, individually and collectively, globally and regionally. In a world drowning in delusion and frivolity, it's amazing. I can't believe the world I'm living in. It's a delusion. The level of delusion is just what to say about it. In a world drowning in delusion and frivolity, they carry a certain sanjeedgi, a certain gravitas that projects the light of attention and knowledge into our darkening world. Essential to this vision and to our reputation as an intellectually bold and unique enterprise in higher education has been the Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference. While calls for the decolonization of education resound around the world, both in the South and in the North, it's not just a Southern thing. I mean, after all, Goras need to be decolonized. They are very colonized, they are colonized themselves. Of course, zulm ka asar sirf mazloom pe to nahi hota, zalim par bhi to zulm ka asar hota hai. While calls for the decolonization of education resound around the world, Habib University is unique not only in its actual institutionalization of such a paradigm, but in the original path we have marked in this direction. For even as the noble and universally salvific goal, I must insist on this, that it has universal implications. It's not just about third world countries. It's not just about the South. The noble and universally salvific goal of decolonization is opportunistically co-opted by nativists and nationalists, not to mention fascists, in many places. Habib University has remained apart in its unswerving commitment to a pluralist and globalist path, that is, to a genuine and strenuous universalism, as the only hope of a substantively post-colonial future. Our Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference embodies this commitment. In its past iterations, the PHEC has featured general investigations into the post-colonial reorientation of higher education, as well as the contemporary landscape of inherited injustice in its many forms, the contours of a reparative global and regional future. This was the year before last. It's actually one of the best conferences, I think, that we had up to that point. I'm sure this will be better, inshallah. Reparative global and regional future, it's all online. You can watch it online. And finally, last year, the endemic nature of white supremacism in our regional modernities, that is in Iran, India, and Pakistan. It is not just Goras, it's not just white people who are white supremacists. We are white supremacists. So many of us educated people around here. One of my colleagues remarked, somebody who was well-traveled all over the world, and then teaching at Habib, she said, I've never been in a place that is, of course, she'd been in lots of different places and seen, this colonized mentality all over the place, but Pakistan really stood out to her, in the extent of white supremacism that exists amongst the elite classes of this country. So this is a very important topic. And it's the same case in Iran, They also think they're Aryans. They renamed their country, actually, from Persia to Iran, so that on the advice of the Nazi ambassador, so that they could also become part of the Aryan peoples. And of course, you can see in India also, this Aryan nonsense that is so dominant more and more. This year, our conference will investigate the urgent question of the ethical and spiritual aspects of the Islamic tradition that are increasingly repressed, as in other religious traditions, thanks to the colonization of religion by resurgent hypermodern nationalisms. It's incredible the way religions all over the world are being destroyed by nationalism. Whether you're talking about Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or whatever it is, now it's becoming very obvious that this cancer of nationalism, is just going to eat away at society, at politics, and ethics, what have you. Thanks to the colonization of religion by resurgent hypermodern nationalisms. It must be mentioned that in conceiving this theme, we also had in mind the work of Habib University's friend, the late great scholar, Professor Sabah Mahmood, who is so sorely missed all over the world, having passed away at the peak of her powers 5 years ago now, with so much left to offer and contribute. The great literary critic Shamsur Rahman Farooqi once remarked with urgency that we are unaware of what we have lost and are losing. In the present case, what could possibly be a greater loss than the recession of the very contemplative heart of our tradition, their spiritual and ethical inheritance, the contemplative heart of our tradition, the our spiritual and ethical inheritance. In this sense, this year's PHEC on the ethical and the spiritual in Islam is critical to Habib's reparative vision. This is one of a very important word for us at Habib, reparative, repairing healing. Many other Habib initiatives also reflect and resonate our critical and reparative post-colonial vision. Over the past couple of years, Professor Sajjad Rizvi from Exeter University, who is going to be on one of the panels, and I collaborated on two highly regarded series of talks, first on Islam after colonialism and second on decolonial Islamic spiritualities. All of these are online. Several of the speakers were on these series. And now stay tuned for the next installment starting in January under the title Poetry and Philosophy in Islam. Poetry and Philosophy in Islam. I'm sure that will be of interest to a lot of people. This past year, however, there was perhaps the greatest boon of all to our vision, the establishment of two endowed chairs in the Department of Comparative Humanities. The Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib Chair in Wisdom and the Humanities. Wisdom and the Humanities. Yeah, wisdom, not exactly a word that's very popular these days, right? And the Lady Fatma Chair in Women and Divinity. Also, not something you hear about much. Yeah, both chairs being first of their kind as well as being non-denominational. Yeah, you don't have to be a Muslim to occupy one of these chairs. Yeah, Wisdom in the Humanities, you can be from any religion. Of course, it's highly likely that it will be somebody who works on Muslim societies, but I think it's an important point to make. As non-denominational, yet another testimony to our expansive, pluralist, and universalist post-colonial vision. As the chair of the Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference, I therefore urge you to please participate in the conference with the collective enthusiasm appropriate to our radical and luminous mission in this darkening world. It remains for me to thank the many people who invested so much effort and time to make this conference happen. First of all, I once again thank our speakers for their kind willingness and graciousness to accede to our request and travel so far. I thank our extraordinary department coordinator, Mr. Kamal Tejani. I don't know if he's here. Just really fine for that. For his selfless and efficient service at all hours, as well as my assistant, Mr. Ghulam Abbas Chachar. I deeply thank Hina Malik. Yeah, thank you. I deeply thank Hina Malik and Baqas Ahmed, Tathir Hamdani, Aqsa Junejo, Sadia Salim, and the rest of the MARCOM team. I am grateful to Professors Muhammad Haris, Najib Jan, and Shah Jamal of the Post-Colonial Higher Education Conference Organizing Committee. I thank in anticipation my colleagues, the discussants who will engage, thank you, who will engage the various panels, and also Professor Saeed Rahman, Muzammil Patel, Mehwish Abid, Ashar Khan, and Uswa Mehman for volunteering to work with MARCOM for the dissemination of the proceedings of the conference. I also thank Vice Presidents Amir Hassan and Yasmin Bano for their cooperation, and Shanur Sultan and Wasif Rizvi, our remarkable administrators, as well as the Habib family and other Mohsineen for making possible this wild enterprise that is Habib University. I also thank the many, many members of staff who too make it all possible. And finally, I deeply thank all of you, the audience, for being here and participating. May our thoughts and conversation be blessed these 2 days, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen ya Rabbul Alameen. Thank you.